Hey, welcome back to my channel and happy Thanksgiving. My name is Thomas Patilli, and speaking of Thanksgiving, it's one of those holidays that pairs really well with illustration. Sort of like sweet potato casserole and cranberry sauce. What do I mean by that? Well, before advertising and design became almost completely reliant on photographs, most advertisements and publications, especially around the holiday season, were illustrated. And since holidays like Thanksgiving are all about tradition, one of the great illustrative traditions throughout history were the illustrated holiday covers for the various publications of the time. From Christmas to Thanksgiving to Independence Day, magazines like the Saturday Evening Post and the American Weekly would celebrate by adorning their covers with some of the best illustrations of the era. Even if you're not an illustration aficionado, you'll probably recognize some of these pieces as they have lived on way past the date of their original publication. Since I love illustration from this era, and today happens to be Thanksgiving, I thought it would be fun to do some studies of a few of those beautifully illustrated covers. Many artists have contributed to covers like this over the years, but in this video, I'm going to focus on two of the most prominent and influential of their time, J.C. Leyendecker and Norman Rockwell. Both regular contributors to the Saturday Evening Post, J.C. Leyendecker set the stage for some amazing holiday cover art, while Rockwell masterfully carried on the torch. For this particular exercise, I decided to focus on mainly details of these particular pieces, really just focusing on the figure work. I did them all on one sheet of Arches hot-pressed watercolor paper. I'll have a list of all the supplies I use in this video in the description below. I chose watercolor paper because at first I wasn't sure if I was going to use some paint like gouache or if I just wanted to stick with ink. Either way, I wanted something that could handle a fair amount of water if I chose to use some ink wash or, again, some gouache paint. Sometimes it's also nice just to do some regular pen and ink work on good quality watercolor paper. The first one I honed in on was a Norman Rockwell Thanksgiving image that was originally used for the cover of the Saturday Evening Post. I always loved this image, and like all of Rockwell's paintings, it has such a great attention to detail in it. Apparently, he traveled from Vermont to Maine to search for the perfect kind of kitchen to set the scene in. Like many illustrators of the time, Rockwell would photograph real people who would model for his paintings. But one of the things that I really love about his work is how he will just slightly exaggerate things like facial features and the sizes of hands and feet. He's able to give his photorealistic pieces a certain level of cartooniness and playfulness by adding subtle elements of caricature. This is a really sweet moment that he's capturing in this image, and most of that is accomplished by his use of body language. The soldier, back home for Thanksgiving, seems to take on a childlike posture, the way he sits in the chair, while his mother tenderly looks at him, perhaps remembering when they would do this when he was a kid. Without having to overly spell things out in his illustrations, Rockwell is able to tell the story of nostalgia and tradition through just the use of subtle character acting. I thought I wanted to add a light ink wash to this piece, and as I started to go along with it, I kind of just bailed on it because I decided I didn't want to do it anymore, and that's kind of the beauty of an exercise like this. There are no rules, and you don't have to stick to one drawing utensil either. You can just mess around and see what works as you go. More than anything, it's about trying to accurately capture the poses, the detail of the clothing, the anatomy, and seeing how close you could get to the piece with whatever medium you're using. And then I moved on to a few different J.C. Leyendecker Thanksgiving pieces, all from the Saturday Evening Post and the American Weekly. When I think of Thanksgiving and Christmas illustrations, I really do think of Norman Rockwell and J.C. Leyendecker. I think in a lot of ways they kind of set the bar pretty high as to what a holiday illustration of that time would look like. There's a real warmth to their illustrations and the storytelling within them. And I think that's why they've lived on for so many decades since they were all originally published. I did a J.C. Leyendecker study in another video of mine before, and one of the things that I love about his work is the angularity of his shading and drapery. He creates really interesting shapes with his work. If you just isolate a fold in the clothes or a shadow on the face, he sort of chisels them in a really cool way, almost like he's sculpting with the paint. To me, his work is very ahead of its time. It has like a real graphic and polished feel to it, almost like it was done digitally. But of course, it was all done traditionally. This was long before any kind of digital art. Because of the angular approach to his lines and the bold lighting that he would often use in his pieces, his figure work feels very three-dimensional and real, very much like sculpture or animation. His characters kind of feel like they could just jump off the page and start moving. Like Rockwell, there's a really great element of caricature in his faces, while also maintaining the believability and realism. Leyendecker predated Rockwell, so I'm assuming the caricature, cartoony, expressive element in Leyendecker's work is one of the things that perhaps Rockwell was very inspired by and brought into his own work. I think I mentioned this in my other video where I studied Leyendecker's work, but interpreting his paintings as black and white ink drawings is an interesting exercise that can leave you with some cool results. And because of the sharpness of his lines and shapes, using this calligraphy pen worked really well in getting that kind of like chiseled, sculpted look. I usually do studies like this in my sketchbook, but because I was doing them all on one page this time, I was keeping in mind the overall placement and design of the different elements on the page. It wasn't my original intention with this exercise, but it sort of turned into a little design and composition practice as well. I kind of like how it feels like one whole image in a way. It's like a tribute to some of my favorite Thanksgiving illustration work by two of my favorite illustrators. Both Leyendecker and Rockwell were painters, and painting is really the absence of line. It's creating the illusion of line when lights and darks meet. And my approach is very line-driven. I'm primarily a black and white ink drawing artist, although I'm trying to work on my painting chops too as of late. But I can't help but notice how doing black and white ink drawing studies of fully colored paintings has really helped improve my overall approach to drawing with line. The process of trying to simplify the complexity of a full color painting into black and white ink drawings seems to be very similar to drawing from life. In front of you, you have all the colors and variables of lights and darks, but it's up to you to try and delineate all of that into either black or white. This is a very helpful exercise for the comic artist because as a visual storyteller, not only are you trying to condense complex ideas and themes into digestible story sequences, it also helps to know how to describe things visually in a way that is clear and understandable to the reader, no matter how detailed or render your style might be. In this sense, perhaps doing line art studies of fully colored paintings is even more helpful than doing studies of another black and white line art piece. Anyway, I had a good time working on this. This was really fun for me to do. It also helped me get into the whole Thanksgiving vibe. I also worked up an appetite and now I'm ready to eat. I hope you got something out of this video as well, and perhaps after all the turkey and stuffing, you might give some of these Thanksgiving illustrations a try as well. If you do give these a try, feel free to approach them however you want, whether with ink like me, or you could go full color painting. It's totally up to you. There's really no rules to any of this. I would just say that while you're working on it, try to get as much out of the original source material as you can. Also, there are some great Christmas illustrations from this era, and if you'd like to see me do a similar video like this, but focusing on Christmas illustrations, let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button, and if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, consider subscribing to my channel. As always, thanks so much for watching, happy Thanksgiving, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Take care.